First of all, let's welcome you all to The Tangent. Before we really get started, I want to introduce everybody. First, we got Devin.
Hey, how's it going?
And Tim.
Hello.
Our producer, Harrison.
Hey.
And I'm James. It's just a group of guys. We want to share our love of the things we are into. First off, we're going to start today with books versus movies. All right, let's get started, first of all, with one of my favorite books series of all time.
Okay.
The Inheritance Cycle, otherwise known as Aragon.
Right.
Okay.
The books were phenomenal. For a guy who was, 16 years old when he wrote them? When he first wrote Aragon, he was 16.
Yeah, well, when he started, he was younger than that. It's just, when it actually started becoming a thing with momentum, he was just a high school kid, no matter, however, the starting point is, the things he did with the books. I've had talks with you already about the fact that he created an ancient language, at that age.
Yeah, he had to create multiple languages. He even talks about that in interviews with his editor.
Right.
About having to create multiple languages and sounds and stuff like that. So the books are phenomenal. The series is great. It's one of my favorites. I can reread that thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Okay. So, let's talk about the movie because I haven't read the books, but I have seen the movie, and from not even reading the books, I have my own issues with the movie and its flow more than really anything. Because I don't know anything about the books, so the flow of the movie is already jacked.
True.
But
Most definitely.
from people who have read the books, what else is wrong?
Oh,
well,
shoot.
Just building on what you just said, it's kind of like if you watch the movie without even reading the books, there is an enormous problem with flow of like why they're doing anything. It's hard to just understand right from the beginning, and like in the books, there's just a lot more pulling you towards wanting to know what happened, or what's going on, or why this is happening, and
right. So
and all this.
setting up of mysteries and hooks and
yeah, they get your interest a lot better in the book from the word go.
Right.
As
Background
opposed-
story is key in any story if you really look at it, and there's very little in the movie. In the books, I mean, I understand that when you build a movie from a book, you have to cut things out.
Mm-hmm.
But certain parts of the story have to be in there.
Okay, so from background, so from my perspective of someone who hasn't read the book, here's the background I know of the characters. Aragon himself, right, is Luke Skywalker. That's the end of that.
Yeah, no arguments here.
Yeah.
The guy who trains him used to be a dragon rider, and his dragon died. That's all I know about him.
Obi-Wan
Right.
Kenobi.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Elven princess chick is the hot chick who played Jill Valentine, and that's it.
Yeah.
I don't know what she does in the world. She apparently is some kind of important political figure. She's basically like the Leia. Right. So
Kinda.
I don't
yeah.
know how we got into comparing this to Star Wars. That was probably my
That's
bad.
a completely different
Well, like
subject.
I've made that point a million times.
Yeah,
in reading through the series, 100%, it gives me reminders of just the original trilogy of Star Wars all the time. There's so many different types of symbolism, and it's like, to me, it doesn't take away from it, though. It kind of makes it even cooler.
Right, I mean, Star Wars was based off of a different book.
Yeah.
You take forms of stories from all over the place. I'm not
Right.
saying that detracts from anything. I'm just saying that as I was thinking about how I'm going to describe what I know about these characters, Aragon's just Luke Skywalker from A New Hope. That's all he is. He's
Yeah.
a blank slate of a character who wants to join a rebellion, and his uncle gets murdered or whatever, and. Off he goes.
Even in the Razak, even in the books, it's all about the Razak are there for them. So the Razak are like the stormtroopers that come through and kill his uncle.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, he lives with his uncle because of a past that he has no idea about. I mean, and truthfully, that's just like Star Wars. I mean,
yeah.
these stormtroopers show up because of a past that Luke has no clue about.
Right, and he gets thrown into it.
And the same thing happens in Aragon, where it's Aragon has a past. I mean, he knows his mother's name, but he doesn't know anything about his mother or his father or anything about where he actually came from.
Right, and then you have him come encounter with basically the Force in the form of a dragon egg, and it's
which is also
knowing the full story of Star Wars and looking at the startup of the inheritance cycle. It's an extreme in similarity.
Yeah. But
right.
if you view it as like when Star Wars first came out, it was supposed to be a standalone movie. If you view the dragon as basically the X-wing, because and you can, because Luke is supposed to be an amazing pilot, and his X-wing is the thing that carries him to being able to fight off the Empire on behalf of the rebellion. The dragon is the X-wing.
Yeah, no, they're modeled almost exactly like the original trilogy. Sorry to interrupt you.
The dragon also doesn't just give him a way out of where he's at. The dragon is actually the reason why he has his powers, and the reason why he's able to use the ancient language in the sense that now he can use the ancient language in magic. Knowing the names of things gives him the magical powers to use magic. Now, in the movies, they don't really even say that.
Yeah. That was something I was going to say.
They go over the ancient language, but it was so quick and so abrupt that honestly, I forgot there was an ancient language until you brought it up.
Right. I mean, the dwarves have their own language because, yes, you meet dwarves, you meet elves. The elves use the ancient language as their regular speaking language. Now, the elves are, because they use that language, they are all magical, every single one of them. The dwarves have their own language, which is very guttural, and he even had to create languages for the
Razak,
the
Urgles.
The Urgles, that's the word. Yeah,
the
Nargajval.
Yeah, the
that
super grumbly language of the Urgles is awesome to me, especially listening, on an audio point. But
I mean, I was very disappointed. I mean, I get disappointed a lot when it comes to movies versus books. That's why this whole subject is going to be a thing. Is you can only put so much information in a movie.
Right.
You definitely can't listen to a person's thoughts, but in a book you can write them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a huge thing that's going to play into kind of, I would say, for the three of us, books are going to win over on the movies, and it's just
every
a simple
time.
matter of details being weighed out.
I wouldn't say every time, but a majority of the time. I do have several examples of books or stories that have been translated almost exactly into movies, or have been done better in movies, but they are rare. They are very rare.
Yeah, I mean, I only know of one that I can think of, and it's not even really a book, and it's a comic book turned into a movie. From what I hear is, I've never actually read the comic books The Watchmen, but I heard that movie is very, very close to what the comic book was.
Yeah, and you have people that are fans of that movie that are also fans of the original source.
Yes, and I will say, as someone who has done the comic and the movie, I love that movie because the only things it really removes from the comic are things I didn't much care for in the comic to begin with, like Rorschach's second meeting with Moloch. There was no purpose for it. They just subbed it all, they trimmed it all down to him meeting him once, and that was so much better. And the big alien monster thing that Ozymandias makes at the end of the comic that destroys, New York or whatever, that was dumb. But the reason why it was done that way is because Alan Moore was very adamant about, I never want this to be turned into a movie, so he wanted to make sure that it was something that no one could do, and no one could make a giant monster destroy a city in a convincing way unless they wanted to do it like really dumbly, like Godzilla style. So that's the way he wanted to do it. So they completely removed it because they knew they couldn't do it. So they replaced it with the energy weapon that destroys all the cities, which I thought was a much better ending. There are things that the movie is bad at, like translation of the fact that all of these heroes are just people. they make them superheroes. They make them super fast, super strong. That's not how they are in the comic. They're just people who want to go and fight crime, and a lot of them are kind of bad at it. That's why they get shot to death or beaten to death, and that's a big thing in the comic. But they don't translate that as well to the movie. So there are some good and some bad that you got from that translation.
Right. So, moving on to other subjects of this point.
Yeah, other branches.
Let's do the short list. The short list of good movies that were done from books.
Okay.
Whether depending on what you're grading on, will differ from us. But I would say for sure, movie-wise, Lord of the Rings stands atop some of the greatest movies based on a book, whether it actually weighs out well against the original source material.
I also want to put in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
As far off of some of the subjects of Harry Potter are, it just seems like they did a good job of telling the story without having to tell the whole story. So if you've just seen the movies, which, shame on you guys for only watching the movies.
Of course.
The books are way better, but, I mean, truthfully, if you've only ever watched the movies, you're okay, because you get the gist of the story. And they did a very good job of putting the gist of what's going on in of the story in the movie.
And it's still so popular for that reason. You know, people that have only watched the movies are still absolutely nuts and fanatic about the series. Either way.
That's true, but there are some big shortcomings from the movies that I would like to point out. One, in particular, in my opinion, is Dobby. They leave Dobby out of so many of the movies that at the very end, when he shows up in that second to last movie, you know, part 1 of Deathly Hallows,
right.
I looked at him and I went, why are you here? I don't care about you. Because I hadn't read the books at that point. So I looked at him and I didn't know why he was there. I didn't care why he was there. He got stabbed to death, and I was just like, good, I don't have to see you in part 2.
Yeah, you didn't get the emotional connection to Dobby.
Yeah,
like we all who've read the books first. I mean, I read the books before the movies were even made. I mean, I read the books as they came out. Now, the first 4, I'll have to admit, I didn't even know what Harry Potter was, and there was 4 books out. Mm-hmm. Read the first 4 as quickly as I possibly could. After reading the first one, I was hooked. But you don't get the emotional attachment to Dobby through the movies as you would through the books, because in Goblet of Fire, in the movies, it's Neville that gives him the gillyweed.
And here's the thing.
In the books, it was Dobby that gives him the gillyweed.
I actually prefer, if they had done in the book that Neville's the one that gives him the gillyweed, I would have preferred that because it makes more sense.
Well, that was the original intent of Fake Moody, was to put it in Neville's hands to give it to Harry
and Moody,
in the first
at
place.
the very end of the book and movie, I don't even know if he does say it in the movie, but I know in the book,
he says
Moody
he does.
He said, "You think the witless
Barty Crouch Jr. makes that point to say that I even gave him the book with the answer to that." I gave it to Neville, and he had no idea what he was sitting on.
Do you think the witless wonder would have had it if I hadn't given it to him? I think he makes some kind of comment of the sort.
I'm pretty sure that's the exact quote from the movie. Is that he says that?
And in the movie, it didn't seem like he was rushing to that event for the Triwizard Tournament.
Well,
he didn't make it. In the books, he was rushed. He was asleep in the freaking library.
Yeah,
and was awoken by Dobby and given the gift.
Yeah, he had to sprint.
In the movie, he was just kind of like moseying on down with Neville take this.
They do kind of try and say that he was pressed for time. He says it a couple times, and he says, I only have a couple minutes before I have to get ready for. But they don't really act it out as much because they're trying to get across the dialogue and things. That I'm not so annoyed about.
Right.
But the fact that they leave Dobby out of so much of the movies, it makes him such an ancillary character that you don't really need to care about until he shows up and does the one thing he has to do because there's no one else there to do it in the movie.
Right.
And
That's how it seems to the viewer, especially.
Right. Again, the emotional attachment to Dobby. I mean, because you see Dobby multiple times through the book.
Yeah, he
the
works
whole,
at Hogwarts. That doesn't ever come out in the movies.
The whole him working at Hogwarts and
they don't go over,
is that her name?
Pinky. Yeah.
Winky, Pinky. One letter. I was off.
Yeah, Pinky in the brain, whatever. But the whole elves working at Hogwarts doesn't come up at all.
Not a single time.
And
right.
They completely cut out Hermione starting her group to
self-liberation.
What is it? Spew?
Spew, yeah.
Spew.
And don't get me wrong, like as a result of that in the books, Hermione is way
more annoying
in the books than she is in the movies, and the movies have this bad thing where the guy who directed he wrote the first few movies and he wrote a lot of the movies.
Christopher Columbus.
Right. His favorite character was Hermione, so he makes her look better throughout the movies.
Most definitely.
That's a thing.
Well,
but the thing is, they cut all Spew out. They cut all that out.
I thought they did make a reference to Spew in the movies.
Maybe a passing reference in like a deleted scene.
She hands out buttons, doesn't she?
No, I'm not sure. I think there might be. There's a lot of shit that they leave out, but it's still put in a deleted scene. Pardon my language. But a point I want to make kind of right quick, since we're talking about the Goblet of Fire for a minute. In my opinion, that's kind of the last movie that the stuff that was left out wasn't necessarily all the significant stuff. My biggest problem with the movies is the sixth movie being absolute trash compared to the book being my favorite book of the series. You know, because like they add stuff in that's completely irrelevant to the story of it. You know, that whole thing with the fish Francis with Slughorn is not at all important. You know, the way they explain Slughorn's, you know, the person who he is, like, you know, him collecting students that are talented and stuff like that. We didn't need that story about why he loved Lily, because, like, all he had to do was be like, oh, your mother was one of my favorite students. It's like, we get it. Because you like talented people.
And she was very talented.
She was talented, you know, potions, and it the book is just so far away better than the movie is.
And the thing is, as the books got longer and had more information and was calling back to more and more things that the movies left out, the movies had less and less they could draw on because they couldn't make callbacks to things that didn't happen in their own movies, in their own continuity.
Disappears.
You know, but they end up screwing themselves on that a bit, because if you notice in what was it, the Deathly Hallows Part 2, when he has that piece of the mirror, right? In the movies, they never show how he got it.
Yeah, they don't do a callback to that because it was never there to begin with.
In the movies, he never got it.
Yeah, because I do remember it had been a minute before.
It's just an unexplained thing that he's got, a magical freaking mirror.
It had been a minute. It had been a minute since I had read the books and I rewatched the movies at one point. This was years ago though, and I'm like, where did he get that mirror from? What happened? Oh, wait a minute. That's right. He got it from Sirius. Harry Potter as a movie series is one of those very strange series that benefits from the fact that people read the book. So people who read the book can watch the movies and they fill in all the stuff that's missing themselves because they know it's supposed to be there.
And hopefully they're not super annoying about it like I am.
Right. And then people
I'm one of those super annoying. That was not like the book.
Oh yeah, definitely.
people who didn't read the book watch the movies and they have those questions, but you know they can talk to basically anyone they know and get those questions answered because basically everybody else read the books.
Or if they even have questions, because again, the movies do
a good enough
job to at least know what's
ignorance
going on.
Is bliss. If you don't know that if you don't know that information has not been given to you, then do you really need it?
But other than that little mirror thing, there's very few things that aren't filled in. Like at the end of Deathly Hallows, I keep getting this backwards and forwards because I've seen them both, and I knew the answer from the movie perspective before I knew the answer from the book perspective.
Right.
When Harry gets killed by Voldemort, right? And
God, here's the debate. Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah, this
you know, what's her face walks over and goes to check him and tell Voldemort that he's dead, and she says, you know,
Draco alive?
Draco, is he alive? And in the movie, you can see Harry nod his head a little bit, and she goes, he's dead, and that I always perceived as she's asking if Draco's alive. But I was talking to some other people right after that movie came out who read the books, and they said, no, she's asking Draco if Harry's still alive. And I'm like, these are very different things.
What?
Wait,
and,
what?
Yeah, and the perception was that Draco found Harry's invisibility cloak and was wearing it and was walking around and stumbled upon this whole thing. I didn't know what was going on during this explanation, because if that's all in...
Harry had his invisibility cloak the whole time, even in the books.
Yeah, he strips it off right before he walks up to them.
Yeah, he had it with him even in the forest.
I'm fairly certain that even in the dialogue that's used either source, is Draco alive?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
because her whole thing is
I'm glad that's how that works, because when I actually went back and read the books, that's kind of how I still picked it up. Was still she's asking if Draco's alive.
You are 100% correct. That is my interpretation.
It was
of
the
that.
protection of a mother, just like from Lily is, you know.
The contention. The contention. I think
she's willing to sacrifice her life to save her son by lying to Voldemort, saying that Harry is dead.
Right.
But all she wanted to know before she lied to Voldemort was whether her son is alive. If her son was dead, she probably would have said, he's still alive, let's kill him. You know, because screw this, because she has nothing to live for now, because her son is dead. But since he is still alive, she knows that she can save him.
Yeah.
So by saving him, that means they got to go back to the castle where he's at. The only way to get back to the castle is if Harry's dead, so that Voldemort can parade him around as dead Harry.
Douchey self.
So let's cut this tangent, and I'd like to loop back to some other movies that were better than books. Okay, so we have Fight Club, which a lot of people perceive as being better than the book.
Well, the funny thing about Fight Club is, until recently, I had no idea it was a book. It was always listed as one of my favorite movies of all time, because it has one of the best twists ever in a movie.
Yeah, but it is a book, and the same author that wrote Fight Club wrote movies like books like Choke, which got turned into a movie that people also perceive as being better than the book. So the writer has good ideas, but he doesn't translate them well into a book type medium, and they translate better into the screen. So there are instances like that. But I would like to also expand into more non-fantasy, because we've done a lot of fantasy so far.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's definitely my genre, though.
Yeah, that's our bag.
But let's go into one of my old school genres that got me into reading books, which was horror. Okay, so if we can go over things like I Am Legend. I've talked about I Am Legend a lot, but let's go into something that doesn't piss me off. The Langoliers. Right, The Langoliers by Stephen King. It was a short story.
Is that the Langoliers? Is that the one with the time travel ones?
Yes.
Where they're at the airport?
Yeah, they're at the airport. Okay. The Langoliers was a 2-part mini-series. So it was basically 2 movies. It was 3 hours long.
Made for TV or something like that.
Made for TV, yes. So you got 3 hours to do a short story. As a result, this 3-hour thing is almost word for word exactly the short story, and I think it's really, really good. But the thing is, it was done in the 90s, so the graphics of the actual Langolier monsters is terrible.
Those are a little weird. They were a little weird,
right?
Yeah,
so that was terrible. But in terms of translating the short story to a medium that is visual, it did a very good job. And I've talked to other Stephen King fans that I'm not a huge Stephen King guy. I think he's way too wordy. And some of his stories are very, very bad. But I've talked to Stephen King guys, and they bring up things like Night Flyers, The Shining, There are very good examples of his work being translated into a visual medium. There are very bad examples of his work being translated into a visual medium, like The Mist and
as many times as I've tried
Dark
to
Tower.
read, as many times have I tried to read anything Stephen King. He is so difficult to read because he's very, what do we call it, Tolkien-esque?
Yeah, Tolkien-esque. He
Very-
doesn't get to the point very quickly.
wordy about his descriptors, and like he spends way too much time on certain things. So
It's not even just his descriptors. He will go on and on and on about something that doesn't matter. Like, if you ever read, like, Under the Dome, he will spend an entire chapter describing a guy in a truck, his background, why he's in the truck, what's going on, why he's going from point A to point B, and then he crashes into the dome and dies. Next chapter, he's talking about somebody else. It is completely pointless.
right,
Yeah, it's
right. It's like
madness.
yeah, definitely he talks too much about stuff that doesn't matter. Which turning that type of book and that type of thing into a movie is okay because said guy that you just discussed that crashed into a dome, you don't need to throw his backstory into it. You just throw a guy in a truck and run him into a dome. It's done.
It's a 30-second scene. You can do it, have it done with, and it builds some tension because now you know the dome is there. You know, but I don't know. Let's move off from Stephen King because I said it wasn't going to piss me off, but it pissed me off.
We're
Unnecessary
gonna say one thing about Stephen King, and then we'll move on to something else, which is one of my other all-time favorite books. But first thing about Stephen King is he's amazing at what he has done. He does do a really good job of throwing the horror genre into what it is.
Oh, yeah.
So with that said, we're gonna move on to one of my. We're gonna go to a worst here. Adaptations from a book to a movie. Ready Player One.
Okay, I haven't seen the movie.
I've only seen the movie, so this will be fun.
You've never read the books.
No.
You need to listen because one of my favorite actors actually reads the book.
Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton actually does the dictation
so
for the
I hate
audio
Will
book.
Wheaton, so that's fine.
You don't like Will Wheaton? I love Will Wheaton. Anyway.
I think I'm not the biggest fan of Will Wheaton. I
Well,
don't really see
so,
the
okay,
hype.
so-
No, okay. Let me explain. Will Wheaton seems like one of those kinds of guys that if I met him in person, I'd probably get along with him, but not knowing him in person, I kind of want to punch him in the throat.
Right, I kind
Gotcha.
of get that vibe.
But anyway, so off of that. So I do understand a lot of things on why they did what they did in the movies. Okay? Because trademarks are a thing.
Oh, definitely.
Yes.
Okay, trademarks are a big thing, and you got to pay for things, and I understand that.
Especially
if they had to pay for everything that's in the book trademarked from pop culture from the 80s, that movie would never have made any money because they would have had to pay for the rights to use.
That budget would have been $1 billion, and
Probably
that would have
more
been just
than
for
that.
trademarks.
And never would have made it.
That would have been that would have
Never
just
would've
been the
made that money
trademark
back.
budget. That wouldn't even been paying for the actors to do what they did. So I get it. They had
Which is
to
probably
change
why I
a
didn't
lot.
recognize a single actor in that movie.
Yeah, because they
Which-
couldn't afford it with the trademarks they did get.
Which I totally understand, but in the books he references so much nostalgia that it made my heart happy to hear. Like things arcades, different arcade games that were so difficult and ungodly hard to play that these guys have mastered. I mean, Joust. If anybody who ever played Joust, that is the most ungodly hard game to play.
But
Pac-Man. Unless you knew the pattern, you weren't playing Pac-Man.
Yeah.
So he had to beat a game. He had to beat another opponent in a game of Joust, and that's two people standing at an arcade cabinet playing against each other in a game of Joust.
Right.
But if we
that wasn't even in the movie.
If we move over some of these trademarks, how close was the actual core of the story, the bones of the story?
About 15%.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's what I've heard.
What's missing? Why is it missing? What could they have replaced to get it in?
Okay,
there?
so the whole premise was they had to find this Easter egg that I always forget his name.
Yeah, the big
creator guy,
massive creator guy of
who
this
created
awesome
the Oasis.
game, the Oasis.
Yeah, AI Jesus created an Easter egg.
He created an Easter egg. The whole point of this Easter egg was once somebody found it, they got his share in the company of Oasis. Now, to quick background story on the Oasis, it was created and it became a multi-billion-dollar company because everybody was on it.
Right.
Now, in the Oasis, you can do whatever you want. You can be whoever you want. You can look however you want.
It's a virtual reality version of like Second Life.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, 100%.
Absolutely. So,
which I think most people are probably too young for Second Life anyway. But
he hid hints to finding the Easter egg.
Yep, it's a whole
in his journals,
journey.
in his writings that he wrote. They're in this world of the Oasis that's all virtual reality.
Yep.
So you have to like go into there, and for the longest time they had these gunters that hunted for this thing, and then it started to die out. Well, one guy, Parzival,
yep,
the main character. But the thing is that really changed from the book to the movies is finishing and doing these tasks to get to the next thing. So he left 3 keys. These 3 keys were going to, one key led to the next key, which led to the next key, which opened the main door.
Yeah, and as he's going through this whole journey, he's playing through the game, leveling up, becoming a celebrity because of his dedication to finding this Easter egg.
And at the beginning of the movie, he pretty much already has all this stuff. He has the freaking the DeLorean. He has all these skins and stuff. But in the books, he had nothing. He had nothing because he was poor. He was a poor person in the real world, which makes him a poor person in the Oasis.
So continuity question. Okay. Is the way that he got the first Easter egg mildly accurate?
No, not at all. Not one freaking bit. So in the movie, the first key that he received is by winning a race.
Yes.
Right.
He did not have to win any race in any way, shape, or form to get any key.
It was
the first task that he had to do. We're going to do some spoilers here, so if you don't want to hear spoilers, you can fast forward.
If you don't want to hear spoilers, we probably just gave you a bunch.
Right.
Ignore them all.
So the first task was to win a game of joust against another opponent that was programmed by the creator. So this game of joust, and those of us that are as old as me understand that joust was a very impossible game to play. Mm-hmm. I played it a few times, but I realized how hard it was. Dude, it's Contra hard. Even harder than Contra. It's difficult. But he had to win a game of joust, best 2 of 3.
It's a quarter eater.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
He had best 2 out of 3 against an AI, a created person. And that didn't even give him the key. That just gave him the hint to get the key.
Yeah, it was.
And then he had to go through, and I want to say, was the movie the next, or was it him going through?
It was the
movie War Games.
Yeah, it was the movie War Games, and he had to go to that weird White House.
Yeah, he had to go to the creator's home. So there's a whole world of nothing but the creator's home when he was growing up, and he had to find this secret Easter egg, and then it opened up something else. So he was able to use that, gave him a key, which opened a gate, and when he opened the gate, the task to finish that, to get the next hint to the next key, was he had to literally word for word run the dialogue for the movie War Games.
Yeah, and that was amazing.
But in the books, I understand, because in a book you can write whatever heck you want. In the movies, you can't reference War Games unless the owner.
Yeah, unless
the makers of War Games are the same maker of the movie. I get it.
It's not just that. It's also a matter of keeping everything exciting. So
the race, and I get it. It's exciting. They had to move things on. They had to move the story along. They had to do a lot of things, and I get it. The movie by itself, if you never read the books, is a decent movie.
It was a decent movie.
Cinematically,
I enjoyed it as a movie. It made me want to read the book, but I haven't got around to it yet. But there are other examples of what exactly I just said, which is the movie trying to make the book exciting for a visual medium and things like I Am Legend.
Try and get more demographics underneath.
Yeah,
it,
and I just read the
like
book I Am Legend, and I realized how far off the movie and the book are.
I Am Legend. Okay, when I was in high school, I was that generic high school kid who didn't like reading books, and someone handed me a copy of. It was Tim Bishop. He handed me a copy of I Am Legend. And he said, "Read this book." And I was like, "Okay, I take your advice on video games and movies and all sorts of other things. I will go ahead and read this book." I read it, and it was my favorite book for years. Yeah. And it got me into reading all kinds of things, especially horror. I got into Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho. I got into more Richard Matheson stuff, who wrote things like Terror at 20,000 Feet and Button. I got into H.P. Lovecraft as a result of that. I tried to get into Stephen King, but he sucks. And, I got into so many books out of that, and I moved from horror into fantasy and sci-fi, and then I moved into urban, and then I moved into nonfiction, and I Am Legend opened up a world for me. And when they announced that movie, and I saw that Will Smith was going to be the actor, and I was like, oh man, Will Smith is such a good actor. Yep. He could pull off doing Robert Neville so well. I mean, he doesn't look like Robert Neville in the book at all, but his acting ability is so good. And when I watched that movie, it destroyed me. It was how I feel. So different. It was so bad. Like, when I describe that book to people and I go, it's about vampires, and they go, but there aren't any vampires in the movie. Well,
that's such a shame.
Yeah, because
it's about zombies. It's like, well, then why are the zombies allergic to the fucking sun?
Yeah, in the first paragraph of the book is all about vampires.
Yeah, he's describing the vampires and what works on them and what doesn't, and why why he thinks crosses work, or why he thinks mirrors work, and why garlic works better than both of them, and he doesn't really care, but it works, so he uses it, and he boards up his house, and he soundproofs his house, and he builds himself a little fortress, and they try and get at him every single night. And he has to do repairs, and he hunts them in the day, and it was so good. But it's they cut out and moved things around so much that it made the story kind of unrecognizable at a point. And the entire point of the story, if you've never read I Am Legend, I would recommend it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I do too.
The whole point of the title comes from the very ending of the book. And if you've seen people compare online the ending of the movie versus the deleted ending of the movie, the deleted ending is closer to the book, but it's still miles off. Like, I mean, it's not the parsecs off that frickin' the theatrical ending is, but it's right. Closer.
Parsecs.
I mean, I feel about Ready Player One like you feel about I Am Legend. I mean, that's how far off. And but the thing is like theatrically and cinematically.
That's a hard word to say, man.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's very long.
These movies that we're talking about are spectacular.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you really look at when the original book I Am Legend was written.
Yes.
I mean, I think we discussed it. I thought it was 70s.
It was 60s or 70s. I have an original copy. I could probably go check the copyright, but
none of that really matters. But it was written 30 years before the movie was even made.
At least.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there are better versions of it in movie form. The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price.
I have heard of that. I've never watched it.
I have that on DVD. It is a really good movie, and it's much closer to the book. It's shorter because it's an old black and white movie. They did movies very short back then.
They didn't run them 3 hour long movies.
The movies maybe 70, 80 minutes long, But it's a very slow burn like the book, and it was done much better. But Vincent Price is a very good actor, and the writer was, they still had Richard Matheson around at the time to advise. So, but for the new one, I don't even think they asked his son to advise. So, and I think Richard Matheson was still alive at the time. He wasn't doing a whole lot because he's like in his 90s or whatever. But even Omega Man, which was Charlton Heston, the Charlton Heston version that they did in the 80s, was closer to the book, and it's garbage.
They've done other versions of the movie, just never called it I Am Legend.
Yes, so they did Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price and Omega Man, which they also re-released the book under the name Omega Man during the 80s to coincide with the
same book.
Yes.
Same, really.
Yes. They re-released I Am Legend titled Omega Man to coincide with the Charlton Heston movie. But the Charlton Heston movie is kind of garbage. So it's a very Charlton Heston anti-socialist movie, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, whatever, but it was not good. It was a poor translation. The beginning happens, but the vampires are riding around in tanks, and they're making announcements over like intercoms, and
there's one.
He's running around with a machine gun. It's very.
In the book,
weird.
You very rarely hear them talk, but there's one vampire that he talks about a lot, which happened to be...
it's his neighbor.
It's his neighbor. He used to carpool with him to work.
Yeah.
So he knows the guy. So the guy knows him, so he constantly is calling him out to come outside.
Like, come out, Neville, come out. And,
right.
And I love at the end of the book when he makes the mention of, where the guy was hiding and he couldn't find him during the day.
Right.
And he makes that small mention of, maybe I wasn't really trying to find him because he was like one of the only pieces of
his of
the old world that I could remember, and him coming out every night and yelling at me was the only thing I could remember.
He even talks about really in depth in the book about his wife, and like the whole story of what happened with his wife. His wife died due to this virus plague thing that is taking over the world, and the government kept telling everybody, take all the dead bodies you have to this burn pile. And he talks about the burn pile in the book.
Oh, yes.
It's still burning. I mean, even 3 years after
a giant never-ending burning pyre of bodies.
Right. So he's supposed to take all these dead bodies to this burn pile. Well, he couldn't, in his brain, he couldn't burn his wife.
Right, he tried to hide her.
Anybody that's knows, like, you couldn't burn a loved one. I mean, come on, it's one of those things.
It was very Black Plague-esque.
Right. So instead of doing that, he tries to bury her, and then she digs herself out of the ground and comes back to the house.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Now, the only thing I think they did really, really well, other than Will Smith's acting and his sense of loneliness, that he pulled off really, really well.
Oh, God, yeah.
I love the mannequin scene where the mannequin has been moved.
Oh, man, that throws him for a loop.
That was a really good scene. It is nowhere near any scene in the book, but it reminds me of the book because of how it feels.
Yes.
But the only other thing that really reminds me of anything in the book was the scene where he has to kill his own dog. That reminds me of a scene in the book. That was close. That was as close as they came, that was it.
In the movies, the dog was his from
the get,
from a puppy all the way, and he trained it, and blah blah blah. So,
but in the
that
book,
was his companion.
In the book, that was the first living thing he came across in a very long time.
I think they kept saying 3 years. I mean,
right.
And I can only say that because I just read the book.
Yeah.
Within the over this past week, I read the book.
But for years, the only thing he's encountered are these vampires every single day, and he finally encounters something that's alive and is just as weary of him as it is of the vampires, because all it knows is these things walk around on two legs are trying to eat me.
Right.
And
they want his blood.
So he spends chapter after chapter trying to lure this dog in and instill trust in it, and then when it finally comes to him, it's infected. And he's trying to develop a cure, and the next, it does a jump of a couple of months, and there's no more dog. And he's just a wreck.
Yeah. they do jump time a lot. He does jump time a lot in the book.
Yeah, they jump seasons every once in a while.
It took me a while to realize where I was. Am I in a flashback? Am I in a flash forward? Am I? But
that's something that's always kind of hard. You
Yeah.
know, we've talked about, manga versus, anime and
we haven't even got into that
versus,
really.
Versus that kind of thing. You guys briefly mentioned it, but like, I've caught up in My Hero Academia manga right now. I've read the latest chapter, and I'm noticing in the show just like I would say between book original source and like on your screen source, the coolest difference to where you can't really even hate one or the other that I've noticed is like manga versus anime is like it's always close enough to the source. Anime is gonna have filler and stuff like that, but the purpose of that. That's why it's called filler.
Yeah, it's filling time until they write another chapter.
And then what you get in the anime that you don't get from the manga is just the cool crap that you see happening that you kind of just have to make your own when you're reading it. Versus now it's actually they're showing you what's happening.
In this vein, there are two things I would like to bring up. One is Full Metal Alchemist.
Okay.
Right? So you had the two series of Full Metal Alchemist. One of them was being done while the manga was being put out.
Yeah.
And as a result, it outran, and they didn't want to do filler because it would destroy the timeline.
Which is smart.
Right? So they made their own story. And in my opinion, the story they made up is a perfectly good story. I like that story.
A lot of people crap on it the time.
They do, but that's just because it's different from the manga. But as a story in and of itself, I think it's very good.
Oh.
And then when they did Brotherhood, it was the manga story, basically word for word. Mm. And I think that's very good as well. They're both very good. They're just good for different reasons.
I've heard, from a bunch of different, sources, people say, oh, forget the show, watch up to a certain point really, and then just start watching Brotherhood. And then I've had other people that are like,
I've heard people just say start with Brotherhood, and there's problems with that because if you just start with Brotherhood, it feels like it starts in the middle because it kind of does.
It definitely does. Like before I actually completely watched through all of it, I was not sure what was what. So I was told by a stingy anime fan, oh, just watch Brotherhood. That's the manga. That's the canon. Go for that. Right. And those
are the people that tell you to only watch sub.
Yeah. It's like, oh, F me, right, for wanting to watch in my native language, right?
Yeah. I'm not big on having to read my TV shows.
I don't want to have to activate my Sharingan every time I watch something.
Right. God forbid I want to be able to do something else while I'm watching TV.
Yeah, I have a tendency to do that too. It's like I can't watch TV shows that have a ton of subtitles because I like to walk around the house and do things around the house while the TV show is on.
If I'm going to watch something that has a bunch of subtitles, I need to be in the mood to watch something with a bunch of subtitles.
Yeah.
I have to be able
I gotta put the phone down. I
gotta not want to do anything else but watch this show right now.
Right. And I could never get into the subtitled anime. I mean, truthfully, I'm not going to lie, I'm not that into anime. Yeah, you guys are, and I respect you for that.
There are good animes that you can get people into that are realistic and non-anime like Cowboy Bebop, or Outlaw Star, or even ones that kind of slightly cross over like Trigun.
Yeah, that's what's cool about anime, manga, whatever the hell you want to call it. It's like it's such a broad umbrella. There's all kinds of shit.
When people talk about anime as a genre, they're wrong because anime is not a genre. It is a series of genres.
It's a style.
Right, because within anime, well, that umbrella of anime, there's different types of anime. I mean, there's there's the anime where it's all drama for the girls.
There's dramas. There's dramas, slices of life. There's action. There's
and
romance.
You'll even see some really great animes where they do multiple kinds. Like I just finished. There's only 12 episodes of this, but like if you haven't seen it, Chivalry of a Failed Knight.
No, I haven't.
I recommend it because it's got like romance and humor like mixed together. It's got action. It's got great story. I love that.
Like one of my favorite animes is Case Closed in America. In Japan, it's called Detective Conan. It is an extremely long-running series. It's a mystery show where he's a detective.
Yeah.
And I hate to contradict myself, but in anime fashion, he's also a teenager that's been turned into a little kid, and now he solves mysteries.
Go figure.
But, right.
That's total anime fashion.
If you know, you know.
Right. But not to pigeonhole anime, but the second point I wanted to bring up was good filler. Right? There are points where filler in anime can be good, where you can deviate from the source material and get good fun stories. Dragon Ball Z is a fun example of this on occasion. My favorite episode of Dragon Ball Z is the episode where they learn how to drive cars.
Why did I know you were going to say that? Why did I know you were going to say that? Because we all know Piccolo's black. He dresses like he's black in that episode. Yeah, that's a great filler episode.
But the fact that when they did Dragon Ball Kai and they were cutting all the filler, I was so mad that they cut that episode, because that is one of my favorite episodes of the entire show, and just they were cutting all the filler, and it was filler, but it was fun filler. It was good filler.
Filler isn't the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of filler, honestly.
Filler is never a bad thing. I mean, even in regular...
Filler is not a bad thing in and of itself, but it can be bad.
Even in
regular Bleach is a good example of bad filler.
Even in regular live-action TV, non-anime, they have plenty of filler. Like, a lot of these dramas now you complete a whole thing in one episode. But they all have these the underlying stories. The stories that keep building through a whole season.
A huge example is like any show on like Channel 11.
Oh, any of the CW stuff?
Any CW or Warner Brothers show is like 100%.
You know where you get that from is from a lot of the USA shows, like the procedurals they did, like Burn Notice and Suits. Where you would have the underlying story that they would add a small piece to at the end of every episode, but the actual meat of the episode was something that had nothing to do with it. So every episode was basically filler until like the last 5 minutes.
I think of the superhero TV shows on the CW, which I was really into for a while.
The Arrowverse stuff, the Flashes,
but lately I've been watching NCIS. I know, I'm weird. Sorry. But I've been watching a lot of NCIS, and they do that a lot, where it's like the whole episode is about solving one case that they're talking about at that one time, but throughout that whole case, little things pop up for each character that's within that realm. So filler is never a bad thing, because
it gives you character development.
Especially it adds to the character
development.
Especially
in a show like that, because they get that from the Law and Order style.
Oh yeah.
Where
I'm also into Law and Order. I love that stuff.
Law and Order kind of comes from the old anthologies like Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and Tales from the Dark Side and all that junk. Which was all good stuff, but it makes an anthology into a consistent show with your same characters. And then they took that and they stuck an underlying story in it, and it makes it more exciting because you're following these same characters, and they're now all of a sudden, instead of just solving the crime of the week, they're also solving the crime of the week and the big crime with the big person. And it's a way to up your ante. And then once that got popular, everyone started doing it. And like I said, the USA does it for basically all their shows now. The CW does it for all their shows now. NCIS they were one of the first ones to kind of steal it from Law and Order. But Law and Order kind of stole it from themselves, because when they went from just having regular Law and Order to like SVU.
Yeah, well,
that's what SVU kind of turned into.
Law and Order, actually, technically, if you really want to get down to it, they stole it from shows from like NYPD Blue.
Yeah.
I mean, because NYPD Blue was on way before that. So this is a prime example of why we call this a tangent, because we get completely off subject.
Yeah, we're not even.
What was our subject again?
See, I've got one. I was kind of thinking about when you guys brought up Dragon Ball.
Okay, yeah.
Dragon Ball Evolution.
Oh, terrible movie! No, how could you do such a thing?
Oh, you brought up that
of such horror.
Back to subject matter.
I would like to point out one thing real quick. Akira Toriyama low-key said that Dragon Ball Super is his response to Dragon Ball Evolution.
In what way?
It was in an interview when someone asked him about Dragon Ball Evolution. He made a few comments and then alluded to the fact that maybe he's making a new show. Because he didn't much care for maybe how they did a couple things, and
you don't
like,
say.
But
Like,
the thing is,
the cast of Shameless plays Goku and Bulma, and it's terrible.
Okay, look.
The cast of Shameless.
The two main characters in Shameless for the first 3 seasons play the two main characters.
The chick who played Bulma, I don't mind her. I like her a lot. She's been in other movies and she's done very well.
Talented.
She's extremely talented. She's an actual opera singer. She was in a version of Phantom of the Opera. I can't remember which movie it was, but she was Emmy Rossum. Is that her name? Emmy Rossum.
Emmy Rossum.
She's very good. Why is she Bulma?
Why is she Bulma?
Why? What part of Bulma says you need to go get an opera style actor to go play Bulma?
Why are they in high school?
Why are they in high school? Why are they in America?
Why is the Kamehameha just him going like this? Just some
At what
I
point
never
in time,
saw the movie because I heard how horrible.
At what
it
point in
was.
time did the Kamehameha become a wind style movie?
Yeah, what is this? This ain't Naruto.
What is this?
So other movies that from anime that were horrible was obviously The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
I don't recall that being a thing.
I
I think
never-
it's fake. I don't know what you're
Is
talking
it one of
about.
those? Is it one of those?
Has anybody
movies
actually seen
No,
this movie?
but
I have, and truthfully, I ain't gonna lie. I
But-
did watch the movie, but I never watched any of the
Yeah,
anime,
you're
so I had no
Last Airbender
point
actually.
to compare it to. Nothing to say. Oh, this is horrible. The movie itself was eh.
Last
Would
Airbender.
Would I watch it again? Probably not. I've only ever
Yeah,
seen it
and
once,
it's
and I'll never watch it again.
And you know
Yeah.
your movie sucks when people that
What's
don't
that?
even know
Last
the
Airbender
original
is
material
technically not an
are
anime.
just like,
What was
I would
it?
probably never watch
James
that
Cameron.
again.
Well, you mean Aragon?
Yeah,
Really?
Okay, so
It's technically a cartoon.
the
It's technically
one-
just considered a cartoon, not an anime.
it is technically, but it's done in an anime type
What are we
style.
talking about?
Avatar. But
yeah,
Avatar
yeah.
actually brings up another really good point that I wanted to get into, which is not so much books versus movies, but books and movies. So,
Yeah, I like that.
Avatar: The Last Airbender was a series of TV show, a series that was a TV show, and it afterward had a lot of open ends that they expanded into manga style comics because it was an anime style show. They had manga style comics, and they were sequels, and they were good. So it's not just so much books versus movies. It's you can expand on one medium using another.
Definitely.
One of our favorite subjects when it comes to expanding on the universe
Star Wars.
is Star Wars, and we
Oh,
talked
yes.
about Star
Oh,
Wars
yes.
for a minute
Drew Karpshin
earlier.
Drew Karpshin is one of my favorite writers when it comes to things like video games, and he wrote Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wrote the video game Knights of the Old Republic. He also wrote the book Revan. Knights of the Old Republic.
Darth Bane.
Darth Bane, which is one of mine and Devin's
Oh,
favorite
and
series.
Here's where this gets fun. Drew Karpshin wrote Knights of the Old Republic. Greatly written video game. He also wrote Mass Effect. Greatly written video game. He wrote Darth Bane. Greatly written book. He wrote Revan. Dog shit. It's
Yeah, it was not. It
It's
definitely
boring.
It definitely didn't keep
it's
my
so
attention
confusing.
like Darth Bane. Like Darth
But
Bane
this
has
is-
his boring moments.
This is actually a
Yeah.
really good example of how certain mediums can limit you. And the reason why Revan is limited is because it's supposed to be a connecting thread from the end of KOTOR 2
Yeah.
to the Old Republic MMORPG. So he didn't know the storyline for the MMORPG because he wasn't really involved with that property. Correct me if I'm wrong. Leave a comment. But he was supposed to write this intermingling thread. So Revan can't do anything of any importance.
Right. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, and Revan is only mentioned in Darth Bane a few times because in Darth Bane he finds one of Revan's holocrons.
it's the first
But that-
holocron that he finds being Darth.
But that's a
Revan.
huge difference. When he wrote Bane, he wasn't limited. He was just told to write a book. But when he wrote Revan, he
had to
couldn't
limit
go
himself.
outside a certain boundary. and it destroyed the medium. And when you do that to a book or a movie, you can really do damage to it.
Well, and that's the thing about the Star Wars book series is that bug me now is that since Disney took over Star Wars, which is, I mean, it has its points where it's good, it's bad, it's whatever. Everybody has their own opinion about Disney.
Be amazing.
Everybody has their own opinion about Disney taking over.
It look like a beautiful, awesome.
You got the money to make it
with
look
spots.
right.
It's all kayfabe, man.
Right. You got the money to make it look right, but the problem is you also have an upper echelon in your company that they're bad at their jobs.
They want to make money. They don't want to put their.
They want to make money, and they're honestly, Disney right now is riding its own coattails.
Yeah, no crap. Like,
well,
they're relying on the fact that their name is Disney and people will pay them money.
Well, shoot, I mean, but my thing about that is that they took a lot of the good books, a lot of the good novels that were written in the Star Wars universe.
They took like one
and made them non-canon.
Here's the thing.
They take like little points of it.
No. I have a contention with that because Disney didn't do that. Disney affirmed that after they bought it from Lucas. Lucas did that. Lucas took a lot of stuff out of the canon, which is the reason why the lady who was writing Republic Commandos stopped writing. She got out of her contract with that. She got out of her contract with Lucas because he said that he was taking a lot of stuff out of canon, and when her stuff stopped being canon, she was able to get out of her contract with that. That happened before Disney.
Oh, well, shoot, that's new info to me.
A lot of it wasn't canon to begin with. The thing is it was always still really fucking good.
But, I mean, on a broad spectrum, I mean, I think some of the Star Wars novels are spectacular.
Some of them are way better than any of the movies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. I mean, there are some novels that involve...
I'm not just trashing the new trilogy or the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
But one last subject I wanted to bring up just for the sake of, you know, we haven't gotten into like a lot of urban, is Girl with a Dragon Tattoo.
Never read or watched any of the movies.
Okay.
I've seen the movie one time.
Okay. Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, both the Swedish version and the American version are amazing. And I was
movie-wise?
Movie-wise, yes.
Okay.
They are both amazing. And I love the American version because it takes some stuff from the other books to help the flow of the continuity, and they kind of intermingle it, and I think it works way better that way. And I was so mad when they didn't make the second and the third one, and I think the guy who originally wrote them, his plan was to make 7 or 8, but he died after the third book, and his son and another ghostwriter picking them up now. They're writing the 4th book, and I think they put it out already. And they're putting out the new movie, which I don't think is actually based off the book. I think they got new writers to do it. But I was really mad they didn't do the second book. Because, don't get me wrong, I think they're Swedish. The Swedish versions of the movies are fine. They're good. But they weren't as good as the American one. And I think that story deserves that kind of production value. And I really enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed the book. I can't really say I enjoyed it because they're not really feel-good stories. Mm-hmm. They make you feel kind of crappy.
Yeah, they're murder mysteries, though, right? Yeah. They're mystery books.
Basically, yes.
It's
and the guy who wrote them was a former detective, which is where he got a lot of his inspiration from. And that's the reason why he hates rapists so much. So anytime you see a rapist in the books, they're going to die a horrible death because... he actually had, in real life, a lot of rape cases that he couldn't solve, and he had a lot of pent-up anger that he was not at all shy about sharing with people.
That's awesome.
Well, one of the big... One more thing, and then we'll wrap up. I mean, this is getting kind of long. I mean, we can go on this tangent for...
Hours
days. And hours and hours, but we don't want to take too long. But a big subject that we never even approached, and we'll try to make this as brief as possible, but it's going to get kind of long. The Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own opinion on Game of Thrones. And a lot of people just watch the TV shows. And I've done both. Now, it took me a long time to get through the TV show because of the fact that around season 3, there's a giant fork in the road where the books go one way and the TV show goes another. And I understand, it's fine, it's great. And even Martin, J.R.R. Martin, even made a comment that...
George R.R. Martin, yeah.
George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, we got on a Tolkien kick, so...
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, my names, I'm horrible with names. You guys will get that through this whole podcast.
Yeah, he's
I'm
lucky
horrible
if he
with names.
remembers his own.
Yeah, shoot, I don't even remember the name of the people in this room right now.
Yeah, me neither.
But my thing is that he did in an interview said that what he was able to do with the TV show, because he was a big part of the HBO series.
For the first couple seasons, definitely, yeah.
Even towards the end, he did a lot.
Well, yeah, because he had to, because they weren't written.
Right. But he even said that he was able to do in the TV shows stuff that he wished he had done in the books. So a lot of the changes I get, and I'm okay with the fact that the author came out and said that these changes from the book to the TV show were done by his because these are things that he wished he would have done.
And Walking Dead had a lot of that too.
Right. And my thing is like, I'm okay with that. If the author tells me that this is what I wish I would have done, I'm more willing to watch the TV shows or movie for that matter. If they say that they're okay with the changes due to the fact that there are some maybe plot holes or things that he wished he had done with a certain character, but I love the books. I read all 5 books. Took me forever. Now, I'm going to say read a lot, but you guys all have to understand out there in podcast land that I don't tend to read books. I listen to books.
I do as well.
I'm an audiobook guy for days.
There are some books that I will physically read, but they are very few.
I think Harry Potter was one of the last books I physically read all 7 books.
And I didn't even do that. I listened to Harry Potter.
But I will say read, but we're gonna keep that as a broad spectrum of read.
Maybe I read it.
I read all.
Read is just a subword for consumed in some way.
Consume the information. So I read all 5 of the Game of Thrones books, which are, as we all know, not called Game of Thrones. It's called Songs of Fire and Ice.
Yes.
Game of Thrones is the name of the first book, and that bugs me to this day. But it's whatever.
I can see that because Song of Fire and Ice as the name of a show is a bit long-winded. Game of Thrones it's succinct.
To the point.
It's catchy,
and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm okay with it. It's whatever, but it's still the Songs of Fire and Ice to me.
I have my problems with Game of Thrones, which I'll get into after you're done.
But my thing is that it took me a long time to even watch the shows. Now, I did eventually, during Season 8, the last season of Game of Thrones, I was able to consume all the other 7 seasons before Season 8 finished, and then I consumed Season 8. So I have watched them all. I do understand that somewhere around 5 or 6, the books stopped, but the series continued. So a lot of people have complaints on the way it ended.
Yeah, I didn't watch the show. I tried to read the books. I heard a lot of complaints about how it ended. I've been given overviews as to why they have complaints, and they seem sensible to me, but without having gone through the whole thing. But the thing is, all of Game of Thrones is based off of an actual event, which is my whole thing as to why I don't like Game of Thrones. And the actual event is the War of the Roses.
Right.
And as a big history guy, I'm a big history guy. I love the War of the Roses. It was an amazing piece of history, and it was so interesting. And the most interesting part of Game of Thrones to me is seeing how the story of that George R.R. Martin made intersects with the actual history. That's interesting. But I don't much care for the story when I can just go to the actual history and see it unfold the way it actually did when England and France were ruled by the same king. And it was like, just think of that and just know how much big of a mess that would be.
Right.
But it happened. It happened. England and France were ruled by the same king, and that's where you get that entire giant mess from.
Right. Well, and the thing is, like, I understand that people have a issue with the way it ended. My only thing in my brain that keeps me moving on when it comes to that is that Martin has said that he's going to finish writing the books. Still waiting, Martin. Just so you know, still waiting.
And speaking of still waiting, Patrick Rothfuss, if you hear this.
Yeah, Patrick, if you hear this, we're all waiting for the end of your book too. So finish it.
I would love to be a beta reader. Go ahead and send me a copy.
Right. But anyway, so any other comments on? I know we've gone through a lot and we've done our tangents.
I would say out of this, I would like to see all of us give a recommendation of either a book or a movie that people should get into if they haven't yet. And I would like to recommend I Am Legend. If you haven't read it, go ahead and read it.
Definitely.
I'm gonna have to recommend the Darth Bane trilogy. You know, we were talking about Star Wars for a minute, and like, if you're an audiobook person, you're gonna really enjoy it because it comes with the a sound effect track. You know, you got Sith Lords battling Jedi and
Star Wars does their audiobooks very, very well.
Yeah, so they do a very graphic audiobook.
Yeah, it's very graphic audio.
So that would be my recommendation. You know, it gives you a really great insight of not just the dogmatic views of the Jedi, in the words of our Lord and Savior Palpatine.
So for me, I mean, I have so many books I want to tell people to read because I get so much out of everything I read. But there's two. I'm going to do two. I know. Everybody else did one. I'm going to do two.
That's fine.
You're the king of the cast.
If we talked about Aragon quite a bit in the very beginning, if you have not read The Inheritance Cycle and you love fantasy and dragons, read it. Trust me, you will be thankful when you're done because this kid who wrote this, granted he was in his 20s when he finished the series, but he started writing this when he was 16. Amazing.
I wish I had done what he did and started writing
and committed to something like
in that committed of a style when I was that young.
Right?
Yeah.
And definitely. The second one is, it's not finished yet, so don't hate me for this, but everybody, if you have not read the Kingkiller Chronicles, you need to read the Kingkiller Chronicles. They are not a very fast-paced book.
If you like fantasy,
story is compact, and this guy. Patrick Rothfuss, we just discussed him a second ago, is absolutely phenomenal about making things
If you like fantasy or you hate tropes about fantasy, read Kingkiller. It subverts so many tropes. It goes into it's such a good story about how legends and stories evolve. It's so good.
The Dracus is one of my favorites.
Yeah, when he fights the dragon, or he frees the princesses from the ogres, which was just two girls that got kidnapped from a town by a crew of bandits.
Yeah, a crew of bandits.
But how stories evolve, and it's such a good examination of that.
And his aspect on magic.
Yeah.
In that what we consider as magic as fantasy readers. He actually explains.
Yeah, he breaks it down like a science because everyone in the world who actually knows it, treats it like a science, and everyone who doesn't know it knows it. They treat it like it's witchcraft essentially, like we would treat witchcraft in. Yeah,
it's all either science or magic. So
those are our good recommendations on books.
Harrison, you got one?
Go watch Dragon Ball Evolution if you want to laugh.
If you want to laugh, you want a good laugh, yeah.
If you without the bread,
yeah. If you get a group of your friends together, get some alcohol together, and watch that. Because when I worked at the movie theaters when Dragon Ball Evolution came out, we watched it. We were drunk as hell. We had a great time watching that in the theater.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone else in that theater had a good time. I think we ruined it for them. But man, was that fun.
All right. So those are our good recommendations for books. I mean, movies are movies. I mean, everybody loves their movies. Marvel's out there. The Marvel movies are spectacular.
Yeah, we're gonna be.
Yeah, and the Marvel movies make Iron Man look like he's not a douche. So.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's some other good series out there that
he's more douchey lately, but
I really like. I really enjoy to watch. I mean, the John Wick series is. A lot of people don't like the John Wick series because
I love John Wick.
It's too much. It's too much killing and this, that, and the other.
Anyways,
I really enjoy it. But anyway, so
hopefully you guys liked what we put out. Stay tuned for a bunch of other crap. We're gonna we're gonna be going all over the place.
Give us a follow on social medias. Leave comments.
We'll get there.
Let us know what what you want to hear. Join us next week.
We are definitely not going to push ourselves into one genre of type of subject we talk about. We're going to go all over the place.
If you want to hear about it, let us know.
Yeah, this is the
and
stuff
we'll definitely consider it.
This is stuff we enjoy. I mean, we all enjoy books. You'll hear stuff about Marvel. You'll still hear stuff about
anime,
Star
video
Wars,
games.
Video games. Video games is going to be a big one.
And hell, we might stem into outdoorsy type things, camping, hunting, survival.
You can expect to hear these three voices, most of the time, but you'll hear some other characters.
We will definitely bring some guests in. I mean, you didn't hear much from Harrison, but
he's busy. He's
busy, but he will throw his 2 cents in when he feels it. So
so go watch Dragon Ball Evolution and we'll catch you next week.
See you next week.
So we'll hope to get these podcasts out every couple weeks. But for now, just go check out some of the books and movies we've talked about today. We'll catch you later.